A wonderful good day, a wonderful good afternoon to everyone joining us here today on this very, very special 4th of April, Tuesday. I'm calling in from Greece. My today's guest is actually calling in from Cape Town, South Africa. Now it needs to come out. My name is Gaby. I've been international director for the Journey and been with Brandon for over 25 years now. It's been a rich time. It's been an amazing time. And I met some incredible and wonderful people along my journey, along our journey. And Caryl Westmore is one of those people. We actually met when the Journey became famous, if you want to call it that, in South Africa. And Caryl actually promoted us. And that was the beginning of our relationship. But today we are diving a little bit back into the past of how we met and what happened there, what brought Caryl to the Journey. But we're actually talking about Caryl today as being a best-selling author. She has just released a book on how to we're talking about intuition, creativity, and writing, to bringing out the best in us. And actually, we all, or so many of us, have a story to tell, and to actually bring it in book form. And that is the purpose of our talk today. So, Caryl, please join me here. The title of your book, you know it better than I do know it. The Inner Path of Writing, Make Love. The Inner Path.
Make love,
not war.
To the writer within.
Right, yeah, to the writer. Yeah, beautiful. So I was delighted because you interviewed both Brandon and Kevin in the lead up to the publication of this book, and you held a summit and you had quite a few accomplished authors on your list of guests, and including Kevin and Brandon, who both also have bestseller books. And so that's kind of our theme for today. But we go back a long, long way. We go back about 4 years, something like that. Correct. South Africa. Go back to the start just a little bit. If we could just summarize how the journey, how did it all happen? And you look amazing, by the way. However many 20 years have done absolutely wonders for you. You look stunning, and I feel like you look younger today than when I first met you all those years ago.
Well, Gaby, there's a reason for that. As I said earlier, I was a hot mess, completely brokenhearted. I'd had a fire in which I'd lost my dog. This was 1999. I had just, my 25-year marriage was coming to an end, and we had no money to split up. So I was going to be like a broke 50-year-old woman as we moved into the new South Africa. So there was the political situation changing. And really, I think, well, we know when we work with the Journey and Brandon that grace guides. And I had been a law of attraction kind of, a Capricorn, a directed person. I always knew where I wanted to go, but this time I didn't. I had nothing. I didn't know what to do, where to go. So I got down on my knees in a little chapel in Cape Town called Skoonstad, and I said to God, I'm coming here for 9 days, like a novena, and at the end of the 9 days, give me an answer, because otherwise, it was really a prayer that said, let me die or find me a reason for living. Wow. And in the middle of that novena, I went to a local bookshop in Constantia, picked up Brandon Bear's book, The Journey, for the first time in my life. And I paged through it, and I was gobsmacked by 4 things, which led me to want to invite her to South Africa. One, it wasn't the first thing, but ultimately it was about forgiveness. And we were going through a period when there was a lot of forgiving to do with the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in South Africa. There was a lot of post-apartheid things going on. Secondly, she'd had a fire like me and survived it, and I related to her in that. And thirdly, well, perhaps the most important thing really, was she had a story that was absolutely riveting. She told how she'd been diagnosed with a football-sized tumor a uterine tumor, and how in 6.5 weeks had been shown as one of the aspects to heal it, the journey process, what evolved into the journey process. And it wasn't just, I was always interested in alternative therapies. And it wasn't just that she said, I've got this process, come to my workshops. For me, it was a generosity. She put the process in the book. So even in South Africa, I could, follow step by step. And that is when I had this, I didn't know then that it was going to be this big direction from somewhere, which I know is grace, to invite Brandon to South Africa to give her workshops. And as a journalist and promoter, semi-promoter, I knew that I could perhaps tell people about it, and for her to do some workshops in South Africa. So that's how it began. But remember, I had no money and no track record to prove I was a wonderful promoter. I just had this calling from my heart to do something that would make a difference in people's lives. So that's how it began.
Wow, amazing. I remember it so well because, I actually ended up going back and forth to South Africa quite a bit. And I never forget some of the seminars that we had there, because I remember to this day, one of our biggest seminars was actually in Joburg, in Johannesburg. And yeah, it's just an interesting country. It's an interesting land. And I felt very, very at home in Africa, full stop, always have. And I'm so grateful to you because, Caryl, with your passion and with what you did for the journey in South Africa, I don't think there is a newspaper, a TV station, or a radio station that Brandon hasn't been on. I think she's in the early 2000s, we kept returning to South Africa. And I think I remember correctly, but the Journey book in South Africa was a #1 bestseller for 5 years running. And every time she came, Brandon's list of invitations to come to radio interviews, TV interviews, to speak to journalists, do whatever. Our schedule was just full from arriving till leaving every time we came. So, and that was your work. So your journalistic background, and sometimes you just have to, as you said, trust in grace, as you didn't have to prove anything, but obviously what the journey achieved in South Africa was plentiful. So that was just amazing. So very beautiful. Then
and for myself, well, for myself, we put together, I must have been, someone called me a veteran journey therapist, but I was a journalist, but I realized that I had a gift for this work because I was listening to people's, I suppose, stories, which they were going to drop. But, and before I knew it, I was collecting a group to go to Byron Bay to become journey therapists. And I was one of them. So that was the beginning of that. That's how I became. And that for years I must have done, I don't know if it was thousands. It feels like it because I had boxes of books because, we used to take notes. I had boxes of books that when I got married and left South Africa, and we've been from Caryl Morgan to Caryl Westmore, and moved to the Isle of Wight with my new husband, I put all my books, that was the most important thing, on the ship. And then I had these boxes. And when I read through them, I realized all the pain people had let go in my sessions. And in fact, I burnt them. I've got a video of me burning some of my journals and those books because, that was then. And Brandon always said, people, you don't need to record it for them because they're a different person when they walk out of your room. And it was a momentous time for me, to be a top therapist, let's say, or one of the few therapists. And it was only in later years when I began to travel that I did more online. I know a lot of people have moved to online now, but I've been doing it for about 15 years. I've been married 15 years. And I live what they call a laptop lifestyle. I go from the Isle of Wight in the summer to Cape Town in the summer. And so the internet is my friend, and my clients, I can work with them, take them through journeys, take them through the other process work I do, and now help them write their book, the book inside them.
So tell us about the jump from going from journalist, promoter, journey practitioner or therapist or life coach to supporting people in writing their stories. It actually makes listening to you just in this conversation makes total sense, because you are hearing people's stories, and I guess in hearing people's stories, you realize how much material there is. And I always feel, I personally feel, and I always want to encourage people, at least say something what this work has done for you, because that's the inspiration that other people get. It's like, if I know that it's possible, like Kevin, Brandon's husband, has written a book about his story of healing from depression, then everybody with depression who is lucky enough to get hold of his book has the opportunity to undergo step by step what he did, just as Brandon did with her book about healing a tumor in 6.5 weeks. So as you said, there is a story, and then you must have had countless clients that you were working with where you hear stories like that. So
Exactly. And well, one of them actually was about writer's block. I hadn't pitched myself to that. I was just helping, I call goal success, anything holding you back. There could be an unconscious pattern, what Brandon calls a silent saboteur. So I was on a radio one day and someone rang in and she said, "Can you help me? I've got writer's block, or I can't write." So I said, "Tell me the story. You don't know." And I did a session with her afterwards, after the radio show. And what had happened was, and the root cause of why she was blocked was when she was a child. She was 11 years old. She started to enjoy writing poetry. And one day she was in the garden. She skipped inside to tell her father, he was sitting at his desk in the study, that she'd written this poem and she wants to be a writer. Now this is what came out in her session. He was a high court judge. So in a very very strong voice, he looked at her and said, "You can't just be a writer. You need a proper job." So she went. Well, this was when she was 11, right? So she became a chef and developed a very successful catering company, at the end of which the calling to write her books, her novel, was so strong that she sold her company and moved to a cottage in the country, which many writers dream of having the luxury to do. And she had a few freelance assignments, but guess what? Now she was just a writer. She couldn't write. She couldn't do her assignments. She couldn't begin to write her book. And so we needed, as we do in the journey and this inner directed work, to clear the 11-year-old's strong belief, peremptory command, let's say, or vow from her that her father had given her, that you can't just be a writer. And once she did that, and we resourced her, with ideas that she's not 11, she's got her dream, and there's a part of her, because that's another thing I've found. I don't know if you still teach that a lot in the journey. You do the campfire. You need to forgive and resource. But I also found there's parts. I always say to people, you're not stuck. A part of you is stuck. So I think I did learn that in the journey with Bob Baez, NLP in those days. So so a part of her was stuck in, you can't be a writer, and the other part could have new resources and go on to write, which she did. So I coached her a bit more, and she was out of her stuckness. That's the only best word. And so I saw how the journey affected my own life, and it was about breaking free. So I call myself a break free fast therapist, because in one session I could see someone's stuck, their chains dissolving. And in fact, I almost got into trouble for saying I can heal feelings in minutes. That's another story. But people thought I was making wild claims with what I was doing. And so to this day, when I'm taking people through a 3-month write your book course, write the book inside you. Okay, let's go back to the journey. But anyway, to this day, it's important to clear the blocks. I'm not good enough. I don't have enough time. Everyone said this before. There's so many typical things which you don't realize, perhaps if you write in your book, but everyone has. And once you clear them, then you can move on with the help of someone who can say, this is how you write, depending on what book you want to write. I don't help fiction writers because I've never been a fiction writer myself. But so that moved from being a journalist, and I have to say, studying many self-help methodologies before the journey, but none of them had cleared what was a deep, almost semi-depression, which came from growing up as a child of an alcoholic father. That deep pain was what really, even though I was meditating, I was a transcendental meditator and I was doing other things, but I never got to grips with that pain, really, with talk therapy, because in those days, the journey then came along and took you deep beyond talk, beyond the cognitive brain, to what neuroscience now knows as our emotional brain. And I mean, I don't know if you want to say anything more or ask me any other questions about that, but that changed my life. So if you talk about a book and a process that can change your life, it's all in the journey. It really is.
It's all in the journey. This is a wonderful little gap here. It's all in the journey. And this is actually one of the reasons we brought this little program called Real Talk into being, because we wanted to speak about everyday things that happen, because there is a wide umbrella about what the journey is capable of. But what it primarily does, we connect with our true self. We connect with the universal freedom inside of us, universal love inside of us, this that we all are. And I had no comprehension of that before I came to the journey. And that was something I actually opened into on the first day of the journey intensive. And then clearing out some of the old stuff became natural, became so simple. And this workshop, the book, it's all written about in Brandon's book, The Journey, but it's also taught in a 3-day workshop. It's used to be a 2-day workshop, and we do additional skills on the 3rd day in a 3-day workshop. And since we've gone online, which was all with the happening of COVID, we do these workshops around the world on all the major time zones in so many different languages. And we actually offering a 70% discount, because one of the visions and the prayers we do have is that we want as many people as possible to have access to this work, so that we can clear our fears, that we can clear our stuckness, that we can clear the issues from the past. And so we can move forward with life. We can come from a lightness. We can come from a place of freedom. And so all of this, you can read about it in the book. You even have the process in there, or you can come and do a workshop, and they kind of happen almost regularly. If you look around the world, there is a link just being posted right now. You can see the price, you can see the languages, you can see the places. And if you have any questions, we always have somebody on the phone and offer support. And Brandon, in addition to that, also there's a free discovery session where we kind of can become a little bit familiar with her and feel into ourselves if this is something. So that's what's available today. And this little program is not a sales job at all. It's just letting people know what's possible, what's available. And somehow I think we all get stuck. I'm listening to you speaking about growing up with a father who was an alcoholic. I grew up in a family that was so suppressed. But my mother lost her second child and was in a depression, and I was the third, so I was the one coming after that, and I grew up in a depressed family. There was no emotion, there was no anything. It was like a gray zone. And it kind of, by the time I got to nearly 40 years old, I kind of kept looking at the outside, at the external world, to try and kind of make things happen, but I didn't realize how numb I had gotten on the inside. And it was the journey that helped me really let go of some of the resistances, the anger, the just that,
Mm-hmm.
And so we all, this is what I'm saying, we all have a story to tell, or most of us, some, and if I look back, my parents meant so well, that there's nothing I could say that they've done wrong, but they didn't have any, they didn't have any way of how do you let go? How do you overcome so much grief as a mother? How do you turn your focus and attention to your other children? There were 4 children, so it was
That's
tough.
a very common story when
Yeah.
when a child is lost in a family.
Yeah.
In my case, my father was a bomber pilot in World War II for the British. And he had seen so much trauma there that when I didn't know that as a child, when he came back and I was born, there was that, ongoing trauma. And the wonderful thing about the journey, there's so many times you think you're forgiven until you do a journey process, and you really, at that campfire of forgiveness, you really have a deep cleansing and a true forgiveness that is very powerful. And there were some cases in South Africa where I think, I don't know if you remember Jin Faree, her daughter was killed by the freedom fighters one evening in a tavern.
Yeah.
And she came to the journey, and she had already said she forgives the perpetrators, who were still young teenagers themselves. They were acting under someone's directives. But she, and actually some of the freedom fighters, I think, were part of our journey in the end, some of the journey workshops.
Wow, amazing. Well, it's interesting, I keep saying, we all have a story to tell, and so I'm gonna I'm gonna say my little secret now, but I'm also a stuck writer. I started. So Caryl and I haven't discussed this. I just briefly mentioned it before we met to go on the program, and very few people know this. But I don't know, this must be about 6-7 years ago, and we were in India on one of Brandon's pilgrimages, and we were up on the mountain Arunachalam, and I sat in meditation, and out of nowhere, a book cover showed up, and I had the cover, the picture of the book, the title of the book, and it's obviously my story inside it. And it's nothing to do with my mum's depression of losing a child, but it's all about my father. And it's actually very much about forgiveness, because my father was an SS soldier in the Second World War. And much of what happened in the war was never discussed at home. And I didn't realize until he died how much we didn't talk about, how much was buried or was not forgiven. And I so much would have loved a father who was a freedom fighter and not a father who was in the army of Adolf Hitler at the time. And so
I'm getting goosebumps.
And I've done so much work on myself, because this has taken all of our work through Israel, all of our work through Germany. I feel like my whole body, my whole being has been through a war itself. But essentially, it is about forgiveness. And the title that I saw on this book cover was, it was called Papa, I Love You. And him with a picture with his SS uniform on. And I have that picture, so I saw it. And it's one of those little black and whites with the wriggly edges. And really the awareness, the realization that time is not the healer. It doesn't matter how long or how much time goes by. History either repeats itself or we stop and we forgive. And so I'm 100 pages in, Caryl, and And my story is I just never have enough time. I have a sense and a feeling I need a month or 2 months to finish this. And I never have that time, but I took some time out at the beginning, and I was literally just emptying out. I was just kind of throwing everything on a page, and so this is how far I've gotten. And sometimes my dear friends say, what's happening with your book? How far have you gotten? And I said, I haven't been able to touch it. It's still in an envelope in a drawer and filed away on my laptop at the moment. So I will find the time, I'm sure. And maybe I need to realize that I don't need a whole month, that I can do this in stages,
I think just putting it out there and knowing that you have been gifted with the book, actually, which is waiting to be birthed, is a start. And you may need to commit to even an hour a day. Now, one of the people in the the inner path of writing is a guy called Michael Aron. And I'm not suggesting this for you, but I just want to tell you the other extreme is he uses his thumbs in Scrivener on a phone. Wherever he is, he writes a few sentences of his books, and he's written about 20. Some of them are fiction, some of them are non-fiction. But if he's in a queue, he gets out his phone and writes a few. So that's the other extreme. So I thought I'd just tell you, there are ways and ways. So I call him the iPhone hero or something. He's got this method of working on his iPhone and Scrivener. But sometimes the way a lot of writers, and I've been one of those, if you're an early morning person and you do some practice like a meditation, and it's sometimes good to just say for 10 minutes, I'll get out that book and, write something on it, and 100 words, or you don't have to count. And the other thing is to maybe have a structure. There's so many ways to approach this. So I do a 12-week course. And I just want to say, one of the other things I say to people is, imagine your first draft is like you in a sand pit, and you're taking the sand and putting it into a pile. That's your first draft. That's all you have to worry about. It doesn't have to be for the public. And then from that comes your sandcastle. So this came from a young adult writer, because other people have this terrible saying, and it's not just men, but they say it's just your vomit draft. Just vomit everything out. And I don't like that. I like the sandpit.
The sand sounds much nicer.
Yeah, and sometimes, and if you know the work of the artist way, Julia Cameron, which has she's an interesting story herself. She was an addict, cocaine and alcohol, married to Martin Scorsese. And when she got clean, she didn't know if she'd be able to write. And of course, her book, The Artist's Way, came out of her realizing that her partner at the time was stuck. And these were some of the processes you could use to get unstuck. And I've taught that course. But with the journey, I mean, have you done a journey on it, Gaby?
Well, I probably, I'm pretty sure I have, and I can't remember the last time I have, because sometimes it's very close, and then it gets a long way away. But sometimes because something happens in life, something happens, and a process happens, and it's so huge, and this something from the past comes up again, and I realize, oh my God, why it's not finished, because that also needs to be in there.
Interesting. Now, that happened with this book. I did the summit last year, and I wanted it out by December. But certain things happened which made it a completely different book, and even the subtitle, "Make Love Not War to the Writer Within," came when I was just designing the web page. But I've got a little tip for you, aside from inviting you, if you like, to join my 12-week course from May, June and July, unless you're very busy. You're welcome to come along. But what was I going to say? I had a tip there for. Okay, it's left. I was just going to tell you that.
Where was I?
Yes. No, I know that. Okay, the one tip while we're talking about your book that I got from Wayne Dyer, which I tell my clients, is get a mock-up of the picture that you saw. Get someone, an artist or in Canva, and make a mock-up and put it on your wall. Or Wayne Dyer used to put it, make a leaflet and put it around a book and have it standing there while he was writing. So that even if you just do that, to have a visual of that cover on the wall, that's a start.
Yeah. Perfect. And then sometimes I tell myself, this is not about me at all. It came out of nowhere. It came totally left field. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't go away to figure out, should I write a book or should I? It came out of nowhere. And then I just felt like, to write about something that I personally feel like I have moved through so much of the traumas that people live through, that I'm not saying, but what people lived through in the Second World War, and then coming home and having to be locked away or go into hiding or go into prison, and it's like there are so many things that and at the end of the day we are made of our mums and dads. We are a mixture of a cellular structure of our ancestors, and there is so much stuff hidden in there. And it was really interesting because in 2005, the Journey was published. The Journey book was published in Germany, and because German is my first language, because I come from Austria, I was the go-to person. I was going to places in Germany I had never been before. I was paving the way for Brandon's work to come to Germany. So I was really confronted with a lot of German issues. And then 2 years later, the book got published in Israel. And strangely enough, I was there at the first seminar, and I was the person to deal with the publisher. And I became very, very friendly with all of the people in Israel, of our promoters, our journey practitioners, and I feel deeply, deeply connected to all of the people there. So I had this kind of overlapping of these two situations, and of course that wasn't the only war in the world, but it was a big one that affected definitely our generation in a big way. And somehow I just worked through so much in these last 15 years, and very much brought on by the going to different places, going to different countries, being with different people, opening in different consciousness in different parts of the world. And so I feel like I've been through it and have cleared so much, and being able to write from a clear space, I think, is also really, really important. Not writing about, something that you're still angry about or not or haven't cleared yet.
Although Gaby, sometimes, and that's why I don't suggest you necessarily have to start at the beginning and move through each chapter, although it's nice to have a structure. Sometimes you'll just remember something like Israel, and it's worth just writing down some points. And sometimes it'll be with feeling. And I think Brandon's been a good example of that. And also, the more specific you are about your story, the more people you will help in the end. It's all very well to say forgive and let go. What happened, it's all transgenerational, but to actually tell a story and how it affected you. And you've probably seen in different countries the themes of the workshops. Brandon always used to say something would come out, like when we went to New York. The theme of that workshop was sexual abuse. I mean, we did a healing workshop for the 5 people and everyone who'd been affected by September the 11th. And I was there, and I was processing some of the people, and Brandon later said, you see, the whole thing was about sexual abuse. Well, not a whole, but there was a theme, and you must have seen it. And you must have seen it in the countries you go to. And I think that's what will be great about your book, is your own story. and then relating it to how you've cleared and how others could maybe clear, from the guilt or whatever it is that they still live with from their fathers and maybe past generations.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'll have a think about your 3 months. It's a little bit of a busy time. You see, that's my problem always.
Well, Gaby, we could just have a one-on-one, and I can sort of see where you are better. I mean, at least you've got. You know what I like? You've come out. You've got a picture of the cover, and what you spoke about today, because they say you don't necessarily want a book that the person's sorted. Even in any self-help book, I've had to learn that. Any self-help book should have. Well, I call it self-help. Yours could be more a memoir. You get a teaching memoir, and you just get a self-help book that takes, like Brandon's takes you. Hers is a combination, her story and the process. But any book that just a book with heart, it needs to be written. It wants to be written, and I think we could get together. You don't have to join the 12 weeks, but I could give you some pointers, and we could meet, say, once or twice or three, and I could say, okay, how are you doing there? Because accountability is quite a big thing. If you've got someone just helping you and saying, how did you do today? I mean, I wrote a book on online dating after I met my husband through online dating, Success Secrets for Women 40, 50 plus. And it's about, the journey. It helped me realize it's about knowing your own values, and there's a bit of whimsy in it, but the thing I was going to say is that anyway, so that book tells a story and my story, and it gives advice, on online dating, how to clear the blocks to meeting your true love. So there are different ways of approaching your story and, helping people, because that helps people. Because the other thing that Dr. Joe Vitale said to me, because I've interviewed him, he wrote the foreword, is he's once said money loves speed, but if an idea comes to you, it loves speed. There's no good putting it away in a drawer for too long while you've got the energy. If it comes back to you, let's say over a weekend or over a morning, and you're committed, say, okay, for an hour this morning, I'm just going to work on my book on Fridays, say. So there is a way to move through not having enough time as a general thing.
Yeah. I think I kind of figured that one out. I just need to get started again. So that's
good. Well, let's
what
meet
else?
in a year. I want you to invite me back in a year with your book.
For the book launch.
Yeah, or holding your book up and say, I've done it, and it all started way back in April.
Yeah.
But I've written my book. Okay.
Beautiful. What else have we not talked about that we said we would about? I think we talked about writer's block, creativity. I think there are some. Oh, there is something that I wanted to touch base, because it came in early in the conversation. What our belief is about ourselves, and it's actually something that Brandon so beautifully teaches at the Abundance Retreat. The ability to sometimes our beliefs hinder us.
And vows. I know Kevin talks about vows, beliefs and vows.
Beliefs and vows. That it's like you told that story about the woman whose father said, who was a judge, and this would be a typical something like that would be a typical abundance story. And Brandon talks about those things as silent saboteurs. They can be beliefs, they can be vows, and we don't know we have them. It's quite uncanny how these things, and we don't even need to hear somebody say it. We just learn it from culture. We learn it from our peers, from our family, sometimes from our friends, from our teachers, and it goes in somewhere, and it plays at the back of our awareness, and we don't know that it's there. So I think some of the abundant stuff would also be quite powerful and useful.
Because when I was interviewing Brandon for the Inner Path of Writing, she told her own story of her silent saboteurs. When she loved writing, a different story.
Yes.
And the teacher said to her father one day, she'll never be an A student. And she just shut down her ability to write until one day, many years later, and this happened twice, she told me the story, until many years later, a spiritual teacher said, I think you should help this writer write his book. And she said, no, not me, I'm not a writer. And she broke through, so Brandon understands that. And what I love about when she talks about how she wrote her book, The Journey, she sat down and she imagined a woman in a dressing gown in Yorkshire and how she would explain to her the story. And so, as you said, it's not just about you writing a book. It's about you channeling in a way, once you've cleared some of your blocks, channeling what grace, I call grace, or your muse, as some writers call it, is wants you to write. And later you can edit it. That's the other thing. Writing and the creative process, which comes from your heart, which comes from your intuition, which comes from being clear, is not the time to edit. That can be done later. So you can hire a proofreader, an editor and a proofreader. And people mustn't confuse the two. Your first draft is your first draft, and that's all it needs to be, because you can't change a blank page. You can't edit a blank page.
Well, what I love what you said here today is that it's like putting the sand in, putting the sand in the box, and then you build the castle. And I think that in itself is an encouragement. So
good,
because I feel like this is how I've started, and this is how I've started writing, and
yeah, that's great.
It was never edited, I would put out a prayer in the morning, and then I would write until nothing more came out, and then I would let it be for the day, and then I would start again the next day.
That's exactly right. And if there are any other people listening who have the same issue as you, who feel they've got a story to tell. In my husband's case, my husband has written 5 books. I helped him write. He was reading sheafs of paper from being an expat in the oil and gas industry, and then his story on the Isle of Wight. Now, my husband's now 81, and when he was in his 70s, he wrote his first books, and he wanted to leave his children the story of his early life. So some people want to write that as well, and in a way you've touched on that, your history and your life, but you've got a richer ongoing story with all the traveling and the journey you've done, which could come into yours. But yeah, so if other people are listening and thinking, oh, well, what could I write about? Especially therapists, Gaby, I say a book can help you stand out like a shiny unicorn in a sea of sameness. If you have a story and you've got case studies, you can put it in a book and share it with the world to, as you say, examples and stories will show people what, if they're journey therapists, what a journey could do. If they've got their book on on grief or stress or whatever they specialize in. And so that's why I believe a short, helpful book, written about what you do is another version of writing the book inside you.
I totally get that, because it's such a, it tells people who you are, It's like a calling card. It's much better than a calling card. So
especially with all the languages you've got all over the world, I'm sure that these people, if they write a book in German or Spanish, or they can tell their story of what they do as a therapist and what they've done and how it changed their life. Because basically one of my first books was about how I got down on my knees and I was shown the way forward. So it helps other people to hear that things weren't always all perfect when you set out to write your first book.
Caryl, tell me about your course. I feel like we've shared the Journey Intensive here, God knows how many times, and I would love if there is anybody here listening to this conversation and they are interested in your 12-week course. Where do they find out about it, or how do they find out about it? Well, and I should have taken this information before.
No, that's okay. Well, write the book inside you is .com/program. So it's quite a long name. Okay.
Right.
Write www. Write the book inside.
I've gone from right to left typing. How did that happen? Yes, can you do that? Right. Say it again.
WRITE, the book
Right.
inside you.com
Dub-
/ program.
Okay, great.
And I also have a free gift for people who want to know the 5 book hook tips. If they just go to writethebookinsideyou.com, I don't think you even have to put free gift, and they can download a little pamphlet I drew up about what makes a book captivating. It's a self-help nonfiction book captivating. But thank you,
Perfect.
for letting me share that. And I hope that more people, will have the confidence to think about writing their book. There's never been a better time to be
I
able
know.
to.
And,
There's
and
so much.
I get jealous because I see so many practitioner friends of mine is like, on Facebook holding a book, and it's like, where am I?
But
Write the
there's
book
something
inside
called,
you.
yeah, that's correct. But there's also divine timing, and
Yeah.
it'll be written when it's, it's no good getting, I wish I'd done. You've been doing what was important, what grace or what your soul needed you to do, your calling. And now things, as you say, you don't have to travel all over the world, and now you can write your book, and other people might have a chance to do the same and realize, yes, I've been wanting to write this book. Someone once said, some people write the first chapter of a book over and over and over. No, don't do that. Just get your sand into the sand pit. Get it out. Get a sheaf of things and then go the next step. Oh, it's been lovely sharing how the journey is such a powerful. You see, that's why I wrote The Inner Path of Writing. It was Brandon and Kevin and other people who's saying, being a writer is not just about the craft, and living life is not just about the exterior. It's clearing and realizing, the silent saboteurs are holding us back, or our self-talk, or what our parents said, or what a teacher said. It's clearing all that out and feeling our feelings. That was, I remember Brandon one day in a I think it was an abundance workshop, and someone was crying and saying something to her, and I must have been going, ugh. She said, "Caryl, open up as wide as the world." She used to say, "Open up, let it all in."
Yeah,
And
and
so,
it's
so
like
we learned.
exactly. That's so true, because if people only knew that emotions, being able to feel our emotions fully and without attaching a story to it, but by feeling an emotion fully, we actually start to topple and fall into something else, into deeper emotion, into different emotions. And out of nowhere, you end up in this vast open presence, a presence that is the real you. And I didn't know that. And the majority of humanity doesn't know it. And I think that's the secret that I've been wanting to shout from every rooftop since 1996. And I'm still working on it with the beautiful team behind us. And I guess we're making step and reaching more and more people. But it's never been easier. We can do this work from home now. We don't need to travel. We don't need to stay in a hotel. We don't need to sit next to a stranger. We can experience, and we show up here just as you and I show up here. And it's very sacred. Nothing gets lost. The energy is still the same. We do some of our very advanced courses online, and it's, you said earlier, oh, I got goosebumps. I'm telling a story from my heart, and you feel it. But that's exactly the same when we go online with the courses. It's this presence, this energy, this whatever you want to call it is here, and it's beautiful. It's
And
really, really beautiful.
I really want to thank you and Brandon and Kevin and the team, for changing my life, and to credit you for, and I know you were a great supporter, and Cliff, your husband, I got to know you quite well on some of those trips, and I just know how the role you've played, and as a pillar of the journey. So I want to compliment you on that, Gaby.
Thank you, Caryl. And it's for people like you who made all the difference for this spreading out. There's a stone that you throw into a lake, and then it ripples out. And you did a huge, tremendous part for that ripple effect in your part of the world. and not just there, because you kind of took it further to go from journalism promoter to therapist to now writing a book. And it still include, nearly 25 years on, or 24 years on, the journey is still very much part of it. And thank you the same, giving thanks back to you. I'm not doing this because it's a job. It's just been a passion of mine.
Yeah.
a
That's what I
lifelong
prayed for. And I haven't been so close to the journey for a while, but I really feel called now to come and, revisit some of the journey,
please do. Please do.
So I did tip into that one where you had, what's his name, helping with the business side.
Oh, Daniel and I. Yeah, we did.
I did have some time in that one, and I thought, no, now it's time to. It's never too late to go back, and you must have up-leveled some things, and I'm looking forward to revisiting and diving again into.
I make sure you're on our mailing list, that you get all the different updates every month.
So you'll be on my case, and I'm going to be on yours for your book.
Okay. Let's be on each other's case. Well, okay. I think that's beautiful. That's a beautiful bringing this conversation to an end. And I want to thank you really, really from my heart, Caryl, for joining me today, for making this such an interesting conversation in a very complete way, from coming from the early beginnings to where you are today, and such beautiful work that you do. So I want to thank you with all my heart. I look forward for us connecting. And if I have any news to share here on this channel of Real Talk about the progress of my book, I will.
Everyone will want to hear that. You'll have to start each episode. There's a podcaster called Joanna Penn, and she always gives an update on where she is with her work. So you'll have to start. People are going to say, tell us where you are with your book. But on the other hand, you don't want pressure. No pressure, Gaby.
No pressure. Absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today, for listening. And if you're seeing this as a replay, it's been a wonderful talk. Caryl, thank you so much for joining me here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.